December 19, 1944, and the mood inside a converted French barracks in Verdun is heavy enough to cut with a knife. Gray winter light struggles through shattered windows while cigarette smoke hangs in the air like a ghost. The most powerful military minds in the Allied command sit around a long wooden table, and not one of them looks confident. Maps are spread out everywhere. Pencils grip tight in tired hands. Ashtrays overflow with crushed cigarettes. 3 days ago, something impossible happened. Over 200,000 German soldiers came roaring out of the Ardennes forest and smashed straight into American lines. Nobody saw it coming. Allied intelligence had promised everyone that Germany was finished, too exhausted to launch anything serious. But here they are, watching American units get overrun, surrounded, or simply wiped off the map. The reports keep piling up faster than anyone can process them. Somewhere in the chaos, the 101st Airborne is trapped in a small Belgian town called Bastogne. And if that town falls, German tanks could rip the entire Allied front in half and maybe even reach the coast. At the head of the table sits Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, studying the map with red and blue arrows stabbing into the Ardennes like open wounds. The room buzzes with nervous murmurs until Eisenhower lifts his head and asks the one question everyone has been dreading. How soon can someone attack north to relieve Bastogne? The silence that follows feels like forever. Generals stare down at their maps, minds racing through impossible calculations. Distances, fuel supplies, ammunition stocks, road capacity, winter storms. The idea of disengaging units already locked in combat, turning entire formations around in freezing weather, and throwing them into a new battle on short notice sounds like a logistical nightmare that war colleges use as a hypothetical exercise. Nobody wants to answer first. Then George Patton speaks up. I can attack with 2 divisions in 48 hours. Heads snap toward him. Some officers blink in disbelief. Others think he must be joking or trying to show off. 48 hours to disengage multiple divisions from active combat. Will an entire army 90 degrees, move over 100,000 men and thousands of vehicles across frozen narrow roads, then attack into prepared German positions? It sounds operationally insane. Every experienced commander in that room knows the scale of what he is promising and knows it should not be possible. But Patton's face stays calm, his tone matter-of-fact. There is no boast in his voice. He is not bluffing or guessing. He is the only man in that room who saw this coming and has been quietly preparing for it for 11 days. To understand why, we need to rewind to December 9th, 1944, 10 days before the Verdun Conference. At the headquarters of the U.S. Third Army in Nancy, France, everything seems routine. Patton's forces are pushing toward Germany, planning further advances into the Saar region. On the surface, everything points toward eventual Allied victory. The German army appears to be collapsing piece by piece, and most senior commanders believe the war in Europe might wrap up soon. But Colonel Oscar Koch, Patton's intelligence officer, sees something completely different. That day, Koch walks into Patton's office carrying an armful of reports, maps, and decoded signals. Koch is not the dramatic type. He is meticulous, analytical, cautious. But there is real urgency in his eyes as he spreads his documents across Patton's desk. For weeks, he has been tracking German troop movements all along the Western Front, and a disturbing pattern has emerged. 15 German divisions have vanished. These are not skeleton units or battered remnants. They are full-strength divisions, including several panzer formations with hundreds of tanks. They have been pulled from the line, but nobody at Supreme Headquarters seems to know exactly where they went. When Koch raises the alarm, The official explanation is simple and dismissive. Those divisions are being held in reserve to counter future Allied breakthroughs. Nothing to worry about. Koch does not agree. He has spent months studying how the Wehrmacht operates, and holding such a large force simply in reserve does not match their usual patterns. This is not a defensive posture. This is offensive strength, a hammer waiting to fall. He traces lines on the map showing Patton where he believes the missing divisions are concentrating, and he points straight to the Ardennes. The Ardennes sector is thinly defended by American forces. 4 divisions are stretched across a front that should need at least 12. The terrain is brutal, dense forests, ravines, narrow twisting roads that become treacherous in winter. That is precisely why Allied intelligence feels relaxed about it. No sane commander, they argue, would choose to launch a massive offensive through that terrain in December. Koch reminds Patton of an uncomfortable historical fact. In 1940, the Germans did exactly that. They drove through the Ardennes, smashed the French and British armies, and reached the English Channel in about 6 weeks. The terrain that seems to guarantee safety was once the gateway to disaster. Koch's evidence does not stop there. Radio traffic in the sector has spiked. Prisoners of war mention new units arriving behind the lines. Local civilians report increased German activity, convoys moving at night, more patrols, the sounds of armor moving under cover of darkness. Piece by piece, the picture sharpens. Patton listens, his expression hardening as Koch lays out his case, then asks the key question. If you are right, when do they attack? Koch does not hesitate. Based on movement patterns and timing, he estimates the offensive will begin within the next 2 weeks. Patton picks up the phone and calls General Omar Bradley, his immediate superior. He presents Koch's assessment clearly. Missing panzer divisions, suspicious movements, the weak American line in the Ardennes. Bradley hears him out but remains unconvinced. Supreme Headquarters Intelligence disagrees. They believe Germany simply does not have the strength left for a major blow. The war, they insist, is in its final phase. Bradley advises Patton not to worry. Patton puts the receiver down slowly and looks back at Koch. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then he gives a simple order. Start planning. From that moment on, while Third Army continues to attack in the Saar, a secret effort begins behind the scenes. Patton's staff, under Koch's guidance, draws up 3 detailed contingency plans for a rapid pivot north in response to a German offensive in the Ardennes. The work is painstaking. Truck routes are charted down to specific roads and intersections. Fuel supplies are positioned where they can be quickly shifted. Artillery units are earmarked for fast redeployment. Infantry regiments are assigned exact assembly areas, staging points, and march schedules. Timelines are calculated in hours. Every plan depends on precision and coordination on an almost unimaginable scale. They designate 3 possible scenarios. If the enemy drives in from one direction, Third Army executes Plan A. If the situation develops differently, Plan B. If circumstances require another response, Plan C. Each plan covers not just movements but supply, communications, and the inevitable chaos of pulling units from existing combat. Some of Patton's officers think their commander has finally lost it. Why divert time and energy to hypothetical emergencies 100 miles away while they are actively fighting in another sector? Why plan to pull back from an advance they are winning? But they obey. They are Patton's men, and Patton trusts Koch more than he trusts the optimistic reports from higher headquarters. On December 12th, Patton gathers his senior commanders and tells them something unexpected. Be ready to disengage from current operations on very short notice. He does not explain why. He does not talk about missing German divisions or a possible offensive through snow-covered forests. He simply tells them to be prepared. There are exchanged glances and raised eyebrows. Nobody understands the full picture, but orders are orders. By December 15th, Third Army is uniquely positioned among Allied forces. While other commands focus solely on advancing in their own sectors and counting the days until Christmas, Patton's army alone has detailed plans ready to respond if the Ardennes explodes. At 5:30 in the morning on December 16th, 1944, that explosion comes. The stillness of the winter morning shatters as German artillery opens up along an 80-mile front. Thousands of shells rain down on American positions. Communication lines are severed, forward posts obliterated, entire sectors plunged into confusion. Then comes the infantry, then the tanks. 3 German armies, more than 200,000 men, slam into 4 overstretched American divisions. Units that expected a quiet sector, maybe even a rest from heavy fighting elsewhere, suddenly find themselves drowning in fire. At Supreme Headquarters and Bradley's command, early reports get brushed off as a local counterattack. Only after hours of frantic messages does the true scale of the assault become impossible to ignore. The 106th Infantry Division, new to the front and stationed in the Ardennes for what was supposed to be a gentle introduction to combat, gets shattered. 2 of its regiments are surrounded and eventually surrender, the largest mass capitulation of U.S. troops in the European theater. At Third Army headquarters, the reaction is different. Patton receives the initial reports, then turns to Koch. He does not sound surprised. "You were right," he says. "What is their objective?" Koch studies the developing picture, the pattern of attacks, the direction of the thrust, the importance of road junctions. It all points to the same conclusion: Bastogne. From there, the Germans can drive toward the Meuse River and beyond, aiming to split the Allied armies and seize the critical port of Antwerp. Patton nods once. "Get me General Gaffey," he orders. "We are executing the contingency plans." While other commands are still arguing over what is happening, Third Army begins to move. Units in the Saar start to disengage. Artillery begins to shift. Traffic officers prepare to reverse the flow of men and equipment. The emergency that everyone else just discovered is one Patton has already prepared for. 3 days later comes the conference in Verdun. Eisenhower walks into that meeting understanding that the German attack, however dangerous, also presents an opportunity. The enemy has left strong defensive positions and is now exposed in the open. If the Allies can respond quickly, they can strike at the flanks of the German advance and turn a potential catastrophe into a decisive defeat for Hitler's last gamble in the West. But speed is everything. Every hour lost gives the Germans time to deepen their penetration. Around the table, generals wrestle with the cold mathematics of distance and time. They know how long it normally takes to disengage divisions, redirect supply lines, reassign priorities. The idea of mounting a major counterattack within days seems like pure fantasy. Then Patton makes his declaration. 2 divisions ready to attack north in 48 hours, 3 in 72. Eisenhower stares at him. Patton's reputation for aggression is legendary, but this is another level entirely. If he promises relief and fails to deliver, the 101st Airborne and supporting units in Bastogne might be destroyed. George Eisenhower says this is no time for grandstanding. Bastogne is surrounded. If we tell those men help is coming and it does not arrive, they die. Patton does not flinch. He replies, I have already given the orders. Third Army is disengaging now. I have 3 contingency plans ready. I have been expecting this attack for 11 days. The room absorbs that in stunned silence. The offensive that shocked Supreme Headquarters, that shattered entire divisions, that seemed to appear from nowhere, Patton anticipated it. Eisenhower watches him carefully. He has known Patton for years and knows when the man is bluffing and when he is deadly serious. This time, Patton is serious. All right, George, Eisenhower says. Get moving. Patton leaves the conference, finds a telephone, and places one call to his Chief of Staff at 3rd Army Headquarters. He speaks 2 words. Play ball. Those 2 words trigger the carefully constructed machinery of Koch's plans. Orders flash through radio networks and telephone lines. Truck convoys, already organized and positioned, begin loading men and equipment. Tanks and armored vehicles roll out of their current positions, turning north on roads now crowded with southbound traffic, wounded soldiers, retreating units, and refugees. Traffic control becomes both a high art and a brutal necessity as military police struggle to keep the columns flowing. The 4th Armored Division spearheads the movement, followed by the 26th Infantry Division and other formations. Over 133,000 vehicles get involved in the redeployment. Tanks, half-tracks, trucks, jeeps, artillery pieces, fuel bozers, and ambulances. The weather fights them every step of the way. Snow falls, roads ice over, engines freeze. Men stand by stalled vehicles in numbing cold, fingers raw, faces stung by wind. Yet the movement does not stop. Night and day, headlights crawl along narrow routes, command posts shift, supply lines twist and reform to feed the new axis of advance. Other Allied commands still struggle to fully understand what is happening in the Ardennes. Some are only just beginning to organize countermeasures. 3rd Army, by contrast, is already in motion, guided by plans drawn up before the first shell fell. By December 21st, the lead elements of 4th Armored Division are in position for the attack toward Bastogne. They have covered more than 100 miles in less than 48 hours, disengaging from combat and redeploying in some of the worst winter weather Europe has seen in decades. What seems like a miracle to outside observers is in reality the execution of detailed preparation. On December 22nd, 3rd Army launches its attack north. The drive toward Bastogne is fierce and costly. German forces have dug in along likely routes, turning villages, ridges, and crossroads into strong points. Tank battles erupt in frozen fields, muzzle flashes lighting up the snow. Infantrymen push forward through woods glazed with ice, every breath a cloud in the frigid air. American units advance, get thrown back, regroup, and push again. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division and attached troops endure constant bombardment and probing attacks. Supplies dwindle, ammunition gets carefully rationed, medical resources stretch to the limit. On December 22nd, German emissaries approach under a flag of truce and demand the town's surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st, responds with a single famous word: nuts. The defenders hold, clinging to the belief that relief is coming. 4 days later, on December 26, 1944, at 4:50 in the afternoon, 1st Lieutenant Charles Boggess, commanding the Sherman tank Cobra King of 4th Armored Division, breaks through the last German positions near the village of Assenois. His vehicle makes physical contact with elements of the 101st Airborne, a literal link between the besieged and their rescuers. The siege of Bastogne has been broken by the spearhead of Patton's Third Army. Patton receives the news and immediately telephones Eisenhower. "We are through to Bastogne," he reports. "The relief corridor is narrow and vulnerable, and German forces strike at its flanks repeatedly, but Third Army holds the line." That night, supply trucks stream into the shattered town, bringing ammunition, food, and medicine. The paratroopers who endured 8 days of isolation and relentless pressure now have what they need to keep fighting. The Battle of the Bulge rages on into January. The Germans never reach the Meuse. Their timetable unravels. Their last great offensive in the West fails. But the cost to the Americans is staggering. Over 19,000 killed, more than 47,000 wounded, approximately 23,000 captured or missing. It remains the bloodiest single battle the U.S. Army ever fought. Yet even those terrible numbers could have been far worse. If Bastogne had fallen, if the 101st Airborne and other defenders had been overrun, German armor might have seized the vital road junction and exploited it to drive deeper west. The Allied front could have split. Chaos might have rippled through command structures and supply lines, and the shape of the final months of the war in Europe might have been very different. Patton's rapid counterattack did not just rescue a town. It disrupted the entire German strategy. After the war, American officials examined the intelligence failure that allowed the German buildup to go largely unnoticed, or rather unheeded. How had 15 divisions vanished from the order of battle without ringing alarm bells at the highest levels? How had over 200,000 German troops and massive amounts of equipment been assembled for a major offensive while most Allied leaders remained confident the enemy was on the edge of collapse? The uncomfortable answer was that someone had noticed. Oscar Koch tracked those divisions. He identified their movement. He predicted not only a German offensive but its likely direction and objective. His warnings were not based on hunches or guesswork, but on systematic analysis of multiple sources of information. His reports were passed upward. Bradley was informed. Supreme Headquarters received the intelligence, and yet they largely dismissed it. The reason was not purely incompetence. It was assumption. Many senior officers believed the war in Europe was effectively won. From that viewpoint, every new piece of data bent to fit an existing story. Germany was too weak, too depleted to mount a major offensive. Any disturbing signals got explained away as local anomalies or defensive preparations. Koch approached the evidence differently. He did not assume the war was nearly over. He simply asked what the facts suggested, regardless of how uncomfortable the conclusions might be. His analysis pointed to danger, not safety. Still, intelligence alone changes nothing unless a commander chooses to act on it. Koch's assessment reached multiple headquarters. Most treated it as an interesting but unlikely scenario. Only one major commander took it seriously enough to build detailed plans around it. George Patton. He did not just listen to his intelligence officer. He bet the posture of his entire army on Koch being right when almost everyone else believed he was wrong. He used precious time, staff effort, and logistical resources to prepare for a crisis that might never come. And when the crisis did come, that preparation meant Third Army could do what no other force in the theater could. Turn on a dime and counterpunch with overwhelming speed. At Verdun, the other generals stared in disbelief when Patton calmly promised an attack in 48 hours. To them, it sounded like another example of Patton's legendary bravado. In reality, He had been quietly putting the pieces in place for 11 days. He was not boasting. He was simply describing what he already knew his army could do. In the official histories of the war, Third Army's relief of Bastogne gets praised. But the 11 days of invisible preparation behind that achievement often get reduced to a footnote. Oscar Koch's name rarely appears outside specialized military studies. His prediction of the Ardennes offensive, one of the most accurate intelligence assessments of the conflict, was overshadowed by the broader narrative of surprise and recovery. Yet for those who study command and decision-making, the lesson is clear and enduring. Intelligence has value only when leaders are willing to question their assumptions and act before events force their hand. Preparation is not glamorous. It does not come with parades or decorations. But in moments of crisis, it is the difference between improvisation and execution. The Battle of the Bulge exposed a glaring failure at the highest levels of Allied intelligence, but it also highlighted a single vital distinction. Most commanders heard the same reports and concluded that Germany could not do what the evidence suggested it was preparing to do. Patton and Koch looked at the same information and prepared for the possibility that everyone else was wrong. That is why when the German offensive smashed into the Ardennes and chaos rippled along the front, Third Army stood ready to pivot. Not because Patton was reckless, not because he was lucky, but because he believed in planning for the worst even while fighting for the best outcome, because he trusted an intelligence officer who saw what others refused to see. In war, victories are often attributed to courage, firepower, or sheer will. All of those mattered at Bastogne. The paratroopers who said nuts, the tank crews who broke through, the infantry who trudged forward through snow and shellfire. None of it would have been possible without a commander who prepared for the unthinkable before it became reality. That is why George Patton was the only general truly ready for the Battle of the Bulge. And that is why in the end the story of Bastogne is not just about desperation and heroism but about foresight and trust, the quiet work done 11 days before the first shot was fired.